All right, Lions at the 49ers. 49ers favored by 7 here. What I do like about the two conference championship games here is we do get unique matchups. They're not rematches. Get to see these two teams, both sets of games here, both games playing each other for the first time. But the Lions and the 49ers, Sam, what are you looking for?
The Lions in the NFC Championship game.
Let's just sit here and...
The Lions are a game away from the Super Bowl. They've never been.
I do want to say, I don't regret things, but we spent too much time talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and the draft capital thing, right? And I don't want that to take away from how awesome it's been to watch the Lions get here. I just want to give a little bit of that history and discuss it with the Lions. Because I said this to you this offseason, I think leading into the year. Has there been a team in recent NFL history, other than making a massive change at quarterback and going and picking up, drafting a Joe Burrow or drafting a Patrick Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson, has there been a team in the last 20 years that has systematically improved each year and then, peaked? And this, I don't even know if this is the peak for the Lions. Right. This might just be the start of sustained success in the NFC. But this is one of the best team building jobs we've seen over, say, a 3-year period where the driver was not the quarterback. And I'm nothing against Jared Goff, but he's at worst a comparable quarterback to Matthew Stafford from what we've seen. They've made a lateral move at quarterback, say, even if Stafford's better or a little bit better. Say a lateral move at quarterback, but they built in the line, they built the trenches, they added playmakers. They've built an offense that is explosive and has a unique set of playmakers that are tough to cover, and they have a defense that can they've been a little up and down this year, but they can compete, and they've built this thing systematically from over 3 years, and they've gone from picking number 2 overall just a couple of years ago to now in the NFC Championship.
They are a fascinating story because it's compelling, I think, on a number of different levels. They are everybody's favorite second team or everybody's favorite team now that we're down to 4, in part because they're such a historically downtrodden franchise. Okay, the Super Bowl only goes back so far, and if you go back further than that, the Lions have championships. But if we keep this to the Super Bowl era, the Lions are one of 2 teams that have never made a Super Bowl. It's them and it's the Cleveland Browns, the factory of sadness, right? So they are one of the most archetypal NFL downtrodden, beat-up franchises. You then tie that to, the city of Detroit itself suffering more economically than, most cities in the U.S. down the decades and through various different sort of financial crises and all those kinds of things. So you've got incredible underdog story from a downtrodden franchise. That's a feel-good thing. You've got the city itself, desperately needing something like this or desperately sort of deserving something like this. And then you have the third pillar of this, which is they came in and did it differently to almost any franchise out there. They hired a new GM and a new head coach, and they said from the outset, this is not going to be a year 1 thing. This is going to be a 2-3 year project. We are going to set foundation stones. We are going to set building blocks in place, and we are going to slowly move in this direction so that this is a long-term, sustainable period of success. And we are right at the start of that right now. But so far, it's happened exactly the way it was supposed to, right? They've gone from, as you said, the number 2 overall pick, and they've had some luck along the way, right? Jacksonville picking Trayvon Walker as opposed to Aiden Hutchinson is a huge break in the Lions' favor.
Absolutely.
As well as a few other things. So they've had some luck along the way as well, but they've steadily progressed, and they almost got there last year, and now this year they were supposed to, and they have, and now they're in the NFC title game. So it's just such a fantastic story on a number of different levels that really has turned them now into, the 49ers are one of the most storied franchises in the NFL, and everybody's rooting for the Lions.
So this is their second NFC Championship game in history. So 1991, the last time, was that their last playoff win? Or was it 93?
That was their last home playoff win.
So 91, they did host the divisional game. They beat Troy Aikman and the Cowboys, 91, before the Cowboys became Super Bowl champs. And then the Lions lost to Washington in the NFC Championship.
But never made a Super Bowl.
Never made a Super Bowl, right. This is the first time when I tweeted the Lions are playing for a Super Bowl right after the game. That was the first tweet in history. where that was true, that the Lions are one game away from
I
the
think
Super
it was
Bowl.
Tirico, right? It was saying you should go text your friends. The Lions are playing in the NFC Championship game because that's never happened before.
Not in text messages,
right.
not in tweets, not in anything. So it hasn't happened since 1991. They lost 41-10 in that game. But I think, the history matters. And again, it's you throw in Dan Campbell and that intro press conference, and it's just been hashtag fun to watch.
It's when stories like this happen, things like the story starts to get to places where it doesn't normally get covered, right? Like people that aren't necessarily au fait with the NFL and everything that goes on. So I was listening to a podcast that had come across that Dan Campbell press conference, the introductory press conference.
A rugby podcast talking about it or something?
Same kind of thing, but different.
Yeah.
Anyway, they'd come across it for the first time when they were playing that out. And one of the guys said, the thing that struck me the most about that is I was waiting for the point in the story where they started to win the fight. But it never happened. It was just, we're going to get knocked down again, and then on the way up, and then we'll get knocked down again. And it was just, they kept losing. And he's like, I was assuming at some point the metaphor would come around to, and then we'll win eventually. He was like, no, we just kept getting smacked in the face and knocked to the turf. And it's just all the things that we would do to you on the way up from that, which I thought was quite funny.
Well, here they are, 7-point underdogs. So
They got up again.
they're still fighting an uphill battle. Let's start with the Lions offense against this Niners defense. I think there's Greg Olsen just did a great job last week again, I think, saying, hey, the 40, I don't even look at these stats anymore, Sam. Like, which team has the fewest rushing yards allowed in the NFL? Because we know it doesn't matter. It's not a good stat. But Olsen had to highlight that. I think the Niners had the best, quote, best rushing defense in the NFL, as in fewest yards allowed. And Olsen just said, well, of course, if you're using volume stats and this team's winning all the time, nobody's going to run against them. That's why that number's there.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they're great stopping the run. And Olsen's highlighting this because the Packers were running all over them, right? They were spamming the toss sweep play and just doing a great job of making life easier for Jordan Love and the rest of that offense. I bring all that up to say the Lions they got a sexy run game. It's like the exotic smash mouth that we were promised years ago by the Titans is what the Lions did. And I thought Chris did a great job highlighting how they pull Penei Sewell all the time, and they'll just change one little assignment to keep the defense off balance. The Lions have this great combination of good run blockers, good scheme that will just make one guy wrong in the scheme to create a hole, and good runners, right? An explosive runner in Jahmyr Gibbs and a good hard-nosed runner in David Montgomery. I think the Lions have a chance to run the ball really effectively against this Niners defense.
No, agreed. I mean, even if you just look at yards per attempt, they are immediately like almost exactly league average this season in terms of a run defense, the 49ers. It's only the volume stats that are obviously wildly swayed by the fact that they win almost every game and win hard every game that change that. It's an average run defense going up against a very good rush offense. So, I mean, honestly, I would expect a similar story to last week. I think Detroit's offense will have success. Like, it'll be able to run the ball. I would imagine they'll be able to pass the ball as well. They will look vaguely similar to how the Green Bay Packers were able to perform. And that, I think, it's inevitable. You get to the Final Four, you're going to be focusing on the quarterbacks. Every time Jared Goff plays these games, because it's Jared Goff, you're kind of waiting for the brain fart, the implosion, the Baker Mayfield play at the end of the game. And Goff generally has played, he hasn't had that this season. He had a meltdown for like a 4-week stretch randomly around Thanksgiving. And outside of that, he's played really well almost the entire time.
And in the playoffs, he had the one bad play in the pocket in the first game. And then last week against the Bucs, did throw one to the defense in the end zone. I think it was just an inaccurate throw. It wasn't meltdown-y, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of similarities to maybe how the Packers attacked this Niners defense. I think they'll have the run game. The Lions will dial up some explosives. Is Khalif Raymond potentially back for the Lions in this one? Either way, Jameson Williams will get some. He'll get some shot plays. I think Sam Laporta working the middle of the field will be an interesting one because that's where the Niners have, Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw might not have as much success there with those linebackers. But you got to dial up those shot plays. Take those, maybe not on Travarius Ward, but on Ambry Thomas on the other side where, he had the 50-plus yard pass interference penalty last week. I think there's some opportunities there.
And multiple pass interference penalties on the day. I mean, he he was making errors that were almost keeping pace with the number that Darnell Savage was making on the other side.
And then while we're talking about the Lions offense, it's going to be, we forget Dan Campbell went for 4th and 1 on like the 4 or whatever it was that led to one of the touchdowns. Like, those things matter. We know Dan Campbell is going to be hyper aggressive.
Yep.
And on the other side, we've got Kyle Shanahan, who always seems to be battling, hey, I'm the best play caller in the NFL. I create the best offense. But 2-minute situations, I get a little conservative, timeout-wise. He plays more conservative than you would want from such an offensive-minded head coach. And that could end up being the difference in this one. Dan Campbell versus Kyle Shanahan from a game management standpoint.
Absolutely. I mean, Kyle Shanahan's game management on the biggest stage has been repeatedly questioned, and then Dan Campbell is one of the most aggressive head coaches in the NFL in game, script situations. So the good thing for the Lions, I mean, they're a 7-point underdog. They play like underdogs anyway.
Yeah.
Like, that, I think, really suits them, that they make those calls anyway. Like, even when they're winning games, even when they're the favorite, they play like that as just a matter of course with Dan Campbell as the head coach. So I think that's a great thing. When they go for a 4th and 4 at some point in this game, it's not going to be a surprise. It's not going to be an extra added layer of pressure that the offense has to deal with. They've been doing that all season long. They're going to go for it anyway. They're used to going for it. They've got those plays ready because they've been going for it so much. Like, I think that really plays to their stead, that when they need to lean on those types of plays, they're already familiar with it. They've been doing it all season long. That is a good thing for them. One injury that I think is a huge potential thing for that side is, like, Frank Ragnow battled through injury, against Vita Vea, against the Bucs defense. They really need him. It's a huge drop-off when Frank Ragnow is not in that lineup. He's a guy that's, consistently battled injuries for a couple of years. If he's not able to go, or if he's, like, very hampered by that injury, it's a massive body blow to that offensive line.
Jonah Jackson at left guard too. Where is he?
I mean, he's doubtful right now.
Yeah. So if he those 2 injuries for the Lions.
Well, the Ragnow one becomes even more important,
right,
with the loss of Jonah Jackson.
Because,
like, he's probably not playing. And then if you also lose Ragnow, now the interior of offense, it goes back to being last year's offensive line when they had this revolving door on the interior and it just wasn't a strength anymore.
And because, of course, the Niners added Javon Hargrave this offseason, added Chase Young during the season, added Randy Gregory during the season. Not that any of those guys have been dominant or great, but they're all good. Eric Armstead, his ability to win all over the defensive line. So the Niners might have a chance here, especially attacking left guard, to create those mismatches. And then every time Penei Sewell goes up against a great pass rusher, I think I highlight, hey, this could be one of the best matchups in the NFL. When he goes up against Nick Bosa, that's one of the best matchups in the NFL, one-on-one, offensive tackle versus edge rusher. So as always, the trenches are must-see, but in this one in particular, where again you go back to the culture and the team building philosophy of both of these teams. The Lions spent their time building the offensive line. The Niners, since 2019, have spent their time building the defensive line. And when the Niners felt like, hey, they've got one of the best defensive lines in the league, like they did last year, they still went and got Javon Hargrave. And then they still traded for Chase Young and still got Randy Gregory this year. They are never done. And so those 2 units going up against each other, #fun to watch once again, because that's the culture of these 2 teams.
Bosa hasn't had a bad game this year. He has had, like, the quietest, most dominant season I can think of, where nobody is talking about him for any kind of award or anything like that. And yet, okay, he needed the divisional playoff round to get there, but he's got 100 pressures on the season. He barely played the Week 18 game. So the final game of the season, he only played 8 snaps and only had 1 pressure because of it. But the guy's basically had 100 pressures in the year, has been good every single game. His pass rushing has been exceptional in like half of those games. He's been good against the run. And for some reason, he's sort of flying under the radar as, Nick Bosa's not having the best year. He's not at his usual level. Like, that dude is a nightmare every single game he goes and plays. And Penei Sewell's absolutely going to have to bring, the big boy pants to the game. Otherwise, he's going to get wrecked.
He's good at the things that he can control, right? That's what we're always trying to quantify here. Are you winning your one-on-ones? Are you winning, creating pressure, whatever it might be? So that battle's going to be awesome. Anything else on that side of the ball? But I think Ben Johnson, despite having 75 interviews this week, I think you might dial up even a few more trick plays, shot plays more than trick plays. I would say shot plays, getting Jahmyr Gibbs in space. The other thing that you keep bringing up, do the Lions do whatever they can to get up early on the 49ers? Does this become part of the strategy? I always joke that it's a hope, not a strategy, but you can dial up more shot plays early in the game, right? You can do things to perhaps try to put the Niners in a hole to try to take them out of their offense.
And you can also at least, things like taking the ball at the start of the game. I mean, it's as you say, it's a hope, not a strategy to then turn that. Like, winning the coin toss and taking the ball it's a big leap to go from there to a 14-0 lead, which is what you're trying to get to, right? Like, we want to score, hold, score again. Now we're where we want to be. There's a lot that needs to happen between taking the ball from the coin toss and getting 14-0 up. But one of the things to get to 14-0 up, I think, that will help is taking the ball first, right? I think you're closer to that by taking the ball than you are by not taking the ball. So I do feel that against this 49ers team, a standard operating procedure for every offense or for every team they run up against should be to take the ball and try and score first, and at least start to try and put them under some pressure. Whether or not you get there, I mean, nobody really has been able to do it yet, which is, part of the problem. Like, Green Bay almost did it, but couldn't quite do it. So, with every team that faces the 49ers, I think the story is the same. If you can put them in that specific situation, I think it's huge for your opportunity to win the game. And disproportionately so, right? So obviously anytime you're 14-0 up against anybody, you have a better chance of winning the game. But I think you have a disproportionate advantage versus the 49ers than versus other good teams. So if you're Detroit, I would absolutely take the ball and try and get that done. Whether or not you get there is a completely different prospect.
All right, other side of the ball. Niners have it going up against the Lions defense. Another fascinating matchup, man, because you've got the Niners offense that when Deebo Samuel's out there and healthy, right?
Which is a 50-50 proposition now, apparently.
He's got the shoulder. Somebody in the chat says he's cleared, but again, he's been banged up a ton off and on, and you see there is a difference in this offense. And it's not that they don't have other playmakers. It's just I think Deebo's the one that dictates to the defense more. Right, because on any given play, he can line up in the backfield. They don't do that nearly as much as they used to because they have Christian McCaffrey. But it breaks, as we've said before, breaks defenses more to put a receiver in the backfield than it does to put a running back out wide. Mm-hmm. Running back out wide, defenses see that all the time. Receiver in the backfield, you have specifically matched up a cornerback with him. It changes your front. It changes your box count and who's playing the run and who has to fit the run. It changes everything. And Deebo does that. And that opens things up for Brandon Ayuk, for Christian McCaffrey, for George Kittle. Every time we talk about the Niners offense or a Shanahan offense, I look at the linebackers. And that's where I know Derek Barnes had the game-clinching interception the other day. Mm-hmm. I got concerns about the Lions linebackers, though. I think Alex Anzalone has had a very good season.
Friend
of the show. Since joining the show in training camp. Very good season for Anzalone. Perhaps we've underrated him through the years in our grading. He may have suggested that. Alex Anzalone, probably really good. Jack Campbell, he's been a rookie. I think he's played like a rookie this year, especially in coverage. Passes behind him, Jack Campbell struggled a little bit. I think he'll be a good player. I have concerns about Jack Campbell and the rest of the Lions linebackers. Jalen Reeves-Maybin has been playing a lot in nickel sub packages. It might be a Reeves-Maybin type of game to slow down this passing attack. As always, the Lions linebackers are going to have the focus put on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this side of the ball is why the 49ers are 7-point favorites. The Lions do not have the best defense in the world. It's not like the other game we talked about. They don't have the Baltimore defense. It's a completely different proposition. So how they slow down what has been one of the most unstoppable offenses in the NFL is huge. Now, if Deebo doesn't play, I think that is a massive, massive deal. Like, as you said, on-off splits are always noisy, but it's probably not a coincidence that in the 3 games he missed earlier in the season, the Lions had the 49ers had a 3-game losing skid against some unexplainable teams for that to happen against. And then this game, a week ago, Deebo goes out and the offense stalls. They're not what they were. Now, there's always confounding factors. It was also rain. The last time they played in the rain against Cleveland, Brock Purdy also played badly and couldn't get it done. So who knows? But if you're the 49ers, you desperately do not want to be without Deebo Samuel in this game, just in case there is signal within that noise. And conversely, if you're the Lions defense, the thing you want to see the most is Deebo doesn't play, or he plays but he's not 100%, or he plays and he leaves the game early because he rushed it back and he wasn't 100%, whatever. Deebo not being a factor for the Lions is absolutely huge. Outside of that, one area, again, it's been a potential weakness for the 49ers all year, and nobody's really been able to exploit it to the point where it mattered. But Aiden Hutchinson lines up most of the time on the left side. Colton McKivitz is probably the weakest link on that offensive line, and a potential liability. Aiden Hutchinson versus McKivitz is the type of matchup the Lions desperately need to get change out of for that defense to survive against what is, a very, very good offense.
I completely agree, but I would also say my season-long analysis on the Lions and their pass rush, they certainly have those games where Hutch gets his 7 or 8 pressures and no one else gets more than 2 or 3. And you're going up against Brock Purdy, who is really good at extending plays. And I think what's happened a lot to this Lions defense this year is they get the one isolated pressure. And if one guy gets pressure on the play, if it's a clean win, that's a challenge for the offense. If it's like a half win, you're pushing the pocket, you're moving a QB off the spot, it's less effective. And those are the plays I would be concerned about if I'm the Lions. Like Hutch wins, doesn't finish the play, kind of moves Purdy. It's a good rush, whatever. But Purdy extends the play, and there's no one else there to clean it up, right? There's no one else. That'd be my concern with Detroit, because Purdy's good at extending those plays. And then that puts the pressure on the Lions' coverage. You got to remain sticky and scramble drill, and we've seen a ton of those plays this year, right? Purdy to Ayuk, Purdy to Kittle. That was the touchdown the other day against the Packers. Purdy to Kittle on the move. If there's a couple of those plays, in addition to the Shanahan plays, right? That's what we've said all year. Kyle's going to win some plays. The playmakers are going to win some plays, right? Debo's just going to outrun the defense, or Kittle's going to outrun the defense, and then Purdy's going to make some plays. That's what's made the Niners so difficult to defend, is the scheme plus the playmakers plus Purdy's going to play outside of structure a couple times and win. That's what makes it really difficult on Detroit. So I think they're going to struggle to slow down the Niners, and that's why I think offensively Detroit has to play that game, like try to get to 30. It's a big number, but you got to expect you might give up 27, and we need to get to 30 offensively to win this thing.
Hopefully the Lions are getting back James Houston for this game. He was activated in time for the last game, didn't play in the last game.
When was the last time you played, like week 2?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But they activated him before last week's game against the Bucs. He didn't end up playing in that game, but theoretically I think he's going to be back for this game. I mean, if James Houston is able to come back and provide the kind of impact that he provided last year, that's massive for them. Like, okay, it's going to be against Trent Williams. It's not like it's a favorable matchup or anything, but simply having another player that is at least dangerous is huge, because Hutchinson should be able to win his matchup on that side, but they need somebody else to make some kind of impact.
Well, like I said, even if when Hutch wins, there's I'm trying not to be like too anecdotal here, but when Hutch had those games where it's 7 or 8 pressures, if no one's even close to the quarterback,
right,
it doesn't matter a ton, right? If you avoid him, you step up and you make a play. Just having Houston able to even just like track down, like, because he's super fast, right? He's undersized, really fast. Just having him play in the scramble drill, picking up potential cleanup pressure and everything, I think is huge. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on that side of the ball.
Now, Brock Purdy, is he a fraud or is he an MVP? You can only pick one. Because
yes,
apparently that's the way it works.
Definitely. I mean, we are in this world, right? I don't know if anybody knows this, but at the end of the day, only one team is going to win the Super Bowl.
True.
That's it. 1 out of 32 teams. And I was joking last week that, after the wild card round, if your team lost, your QB's trash, time to move on from him. That's the clear answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should the Dolphins move on from Tua? Should are the Bills ever going to win with Josh Allen? All these things come up when a team loses. And it's like, well, this is going to happen 31 times. So at the end of the season, like if Lamar Jackson wins the Super Bowl or Patrick Mahomes wins another Super Bowl, are we going to say, well, if Mahomes wins, Ravens can't win with Lamar. What are they going to do? I mean, it's like, yeah, 31 teams are going to lose.
Yeah. I think it's the hardest thing in the NFL to do is figure out what you actually are in a world where 31 of 32 teams fail, quote unquote, every year. Like,
if that's the only goal, I mean, if I do think front offices, listen, we might come at this the same way fans come at it, which is championship or bust. And if it's not there,
yeah, let's assume
change everything.
Let's assume for a moment everybody's goal is to win a Super Bowl, which it probably isn't across the board. But a team like Buffalo, right? A team knocking on the door every single year, but has yet to even make it to a Super Bowl, let alone win one. How do you determine, do we actually need to get significantly better? Like, are we hitting our head against a glass ceiling that we can control and break with some move here or there if we get a bit more aggressive or if we do something slightly differently? Or have we just been unlucky? Like, is getting to this stage the most important thing, and then eventually you'll win one of these, and that's what like breaks you through the glass ceiling? Like that I think is one of the hardest questions in sports, let alone the NFL. How do we figure out if we've actually reached our ceiling, or if everybody loses except one team and we've simply been that team for 3 or 4 straight years?
I mean, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent here because I want to stay focused on the Niners and Lions, but Brandon Beane, Bills GM, and Sean McDermott, they have their end of the year press conferences, and they're at this tipping point where Josh Allen's going to have to get paid a lot more. So Beane was like, hey, this is a huge draft for us. We have 10 draft picks we have to hit in the draft. And so I do think over time, like, I don't think the Bills should be like, man, we just were 2 plays away from winning. Like, they were literally 1 or 2 plays away from beating the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Again. As they were a couple of years ago. Does that mean you go and you focus on those 2 plays? Well, but we better be better. We need to be better at left tackle and pass protection because that was the play that lost it for us, pass protection. Or we have to have, I don't know, a better linebacker because we had 4 injuries there. Like, you have to stay true to the process, which is just continue to put yourself on the green, and one of these days you're going to hit the putt, right? I mean, that has to be how you handle this thing. So all that said, I think Brock Purdy's the guy that keeps putting you on the green for the Niners, combined with a Shanahan who does a great job play calling, combined with these playmakers here. And I will say there is something to when you don't have your best stuff still coming through in crunch time, right? There is this mental aspect of it. And I do think the fact that like an Aaron Rodgers hasn't been as good in fourth quarter comebacks versus other elite quarterbacks historically, like I do think that stuff matters over time. And I think Purdy has some of that in him, and we saw that last week, not to like completely overrate the one game. So I think overall Purdy has what it takes to like win a Super Bowl for this 49ers team, if that's the question.
Look, I think what he did was more important psychologically than it was tangible evidence of him being Joe Montana. Like, I think there's absolutely something real to what you just outlined. Guys that have the mentality at the end of the game that it doesn't matter what's happened up until this point, I'm going to go and get the win from here. And Montana was maybe the best ever at having that aura. Whether or not, I mean, forget what he believed, but everybody around him believed that Joe Montana was going to lead the comeback, no matter how responsible he was for putting them in that position in the first place, right? Tom Brady, there's a certain element of that as well. He was probably less responsible than Montana at times for digging the hole, but late in the game, Brady has the ball, 1.5 minutes left on the clock. Everyone is like, there's a feeling of inevitability that he's going to get it done. So Purdy putting that out there, like, I didn't play well this game. I was poor, not the level I've usually been at, but boom, late in the game, Purdy turns into Montana, leads the drive, wins the game. Huge. I do think that there's at least as much responsibility / culpability in Joe Barry's defense for that drive. Like, 6 minutes left, that defense got way too soft and just kind of gave them the drive. And he executed it, like he took advantage of it, but it's the same conversation with Mahomes versus the 2 defenses he placed. Like, how much was that the Chiefs offense stepping up to another level, and how much of that was 2 defenses that just ran out of bodies? So same thing, like how much of that is Brock Purdy as Joe Montana versus he ran up against a guy whose job has been called for a majority of the season for drives like that, right? Where the game's on the line, he gets way too soft and he essentially gifts them a drive, right? But my point being, the more important element of that is other people are going to believe it. Like, it happened. It doesn't even matter who's responsible for it. The point is, everybody in that locker room now thinks, or is a little closer to believing, that Brock Purdy in crunch time gets it done, right? Whether or not it was Joe Barry's fault or not, in their brain, the only thing that matters is guy didn't play particularly well this game, and then boom, when it was on the line, he got it done. He'll do it again. That, I think, is the most important thing to come from that game.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue to live with normal takes here. The other thing I said a couple of years ago, too, like if Mahomes, like Brady went to, 10 Super Bowls, in, pretty much half the years, right?
Yeah.
And Mahomes is on pace to do something similar. Like if those two guys didn't exist, imagine where the QB takes would be. Because they've been, to this point, so far above everyone else from a production and result standpoint, Brady and Mahomes, right?
It's just the results. Like, just think for a moment. Peyton Manning won 2 Super Bowls. That's it. Like that's like if Tom Brady didn't exist, Peyton Manning would be like clear and away the best quarterback that ever played the game, and he only won 2 rings because repeatedly he had a championship caliber team and he got 2 or around the game, and then it went the other way, right? Like even when he went to Denver, he had that team was insane for like not just the 1 year they won it, but for 2 or 3 years. And then one of them he ran up against the Seahawks defense when it was a buzzsaw and they got wrecked. Like Brady and Mahomes break everything because everybody else has to live through the Peyton Manning reality where you're going to be there or thereabouts but miss out most of the time.
It wasn't just Peyton. I mean, during Brady's era, you had Drew Brees and you had Aaron Rodgers. Like you had those guys that couldn't do it either.
He's the most obvious example because if you take away the Brady existence, Peyton Manning is like the most clear, greatest quarterback of all time. Like his numbers are nuts, his longevity, the fact he did it for 2 different teams, and yet he could only manage 2 rings despite being sort of clearly the best quarterback in the NFL at the time because it's freaking hard. You don't win them.
And my point was if Brady and Mahomes don't exist and if they're not owning all of the Super Bowl production, you have more Eli Mannings. You have more Joe Flacco's. Right, so the QB discourse, you have more Matthew Staffords. We had a Stafford a couple of years ago. Like those were more common, right? There was that stretch where the Patriots weren't just winning every single year, going to the Super Bowl every year, and there was this 10-year stretch where you had a couple Elis and a Flacco and a Russell Wilson. And if you didn't have, and I don't even know if everybody knew this at the time that Brady was, like in hindsight maybe we knew, but if you didn't have the guy just dominating everything, you'd have more random QB 8 going to the Super Bowl, QB 6 going to the Super Bowl, QB 15 going to the Super Bowl, and perhaps winning it. And it shouldn't massively change what you think about that guy necessarily, right? So again, if Brock Purdy, if they lose this week, it doesn't mean like the Niners should be looking for the next quarterback or anything. It's just they lost. They're one of the other 31 teams that lost. Anyway, Purdy is what he is. I think he's a good quarterback, and he's still young. And he still could get better. And he executes the offense really well. And he didn't play a good game last week. Yeah. All that stuff's true.
Which may well have been entirely down to the fact that it was raining. Like that's now 2 games where he's not been able to play well in the rain.
I think he'll play better this week in clearer weather at Candlestick, as I said this week. Candlestick. Clear weather and against a defense that, like, going up against the Packers and the Lions defenses for your 2 games on the way to the Super Bowl, not the worst draw in the world for the 49ers. So I think the Niners are going to put points up on the board, and to me it's going to be on the Lions to keep pace. Goff's got to play a clean game. Ben Johnson needs to be in his bag for a couple. You need one of the yoink plays. You need a good yoink play. You call it the yoink leak, tight end leak. You need a couple of those, right? They had the Brock Wright play last week. They did sign Zach Ertz as tight end insurance this week, but that's what it's going to take for the Lions.
I mean, look, last week shouldn't have changed much in the perspective of like what is Brock Purdy, and yet apparently it changed everything for everybody. But
it's just because everybody has to have a take on Monday morning, but it can't be a lukewarm one.
Heading into that game, the 2 best graded quarterbacks in the NFL since in the second half of the season, week 9 onwards, were Jordan Love and Brock Purdy. And that was despite Brock Purdy having that Baltimore game in there where the whole thing went away from them. The narrative was Brock Purdy played terribly, even though it was more other things. Even after that game, Purdy is still 3rd. Like he just drops behind Justin Herbert, who, remember, missed most of that time with injury, so it's not a full sample size for him. But Brock Purdy is still like the 2nd best graded quarterback in the NFL since in the second half of the season, and that includes a Baltimore game where they got beat down as a team, and it includes last week where he didn't play well in the rain. Like, he's been not just good, he's been exceptionally good this season, albeit in an offense that we know turbocharges quarterback performance and is definitely aided by Debo and Brandon Ayuk and Kittle and all those kinds of things. So I think it would be a mistake to underestimate what Brock Purdy is capable of in this game simply because he's coming off not a particularly good performance.
Got to have a strong take on Brock Purdy. Got to have it. Joe Montana or trash and replaceable. Anyway, I think a lot of this comes down to Shanahan and Campbell. Shanahan's always been on the conservative end of some of those fourth down decisions, and Dan Campbell's the other end. Doesn't matter. We're at the 7. We're going for 2.
YOLO.
When Dan Campbell went for 2 from the 7 to win, I was like, I need to see this guy in a Super Bowl, because he's going to make some decision that will go down in Super Bowl lore, like Dan Campbell onside kicks 3 straight times or something like that in the Super Bowl, right? Like Sean Payton's surprise onside to help beat the Colts. Something special would happen there.
Oh, another piece of misinformation we can correct is apparently that fourth down fake punt that the Bills ran last week was called from the sideline. It wasn't a reaction or an automatic, you get the look, you take the play. They called that, and apparently just lucked into the fact that the Chiefs only had 10 guys on the field.
Yeah.
They didn't take advantage of that. They were just like, we're going to run a surprise fake now. It feels like the time, catch them by the element of surprise. Then lucked into 10 guys on defense and still didn't get the play successful. So, I mean, you only reminded me that with your talk of crazy random ass plays that get called in big situations.
Yeah. They were the underdog at that point. They were down. They tried something.
I mean,
I'd still probably rather line up with Josh Allen to do it, but I get it.
Yeah, and apparently, I mean, when you consider the fact that they really did luck into, we're only facing against 10 guys, and we actually have the look, we have the numbers.
The execution on it was so awkward and horrible, and I guess Drake, somebody was mic'd up, calling it out for the Niners.
You can debate whether the call was good or not. Then when you factor in they got the look they wanted, it becomes the right call, and then they just didn't execute it.
Given my experience is not on an NFL sideline, but on a football sideline, every time a team lines up for a punt, you hear watch fake, right? It's like, well, yes, they could fake it or they could punt it. There's 2 options. So the idea that someone was calling out the fake, unless it was specific, hey, watch, he's going to run it, or watch direct snap, but yelling out watch fake, it's that's not really all that helpful. Anyway, so I don't know if somebody actually called it out for the Niners. Do you want to make some picks, or do you have anything else to add to this?
Okay.
Chiefs.
Make Chiefs.
Whatever.
Make picks, rather.
49ers by 7 here.
Lions.
Oh, picking the Lions as well.
Covering but losing.
To at least cover. So you're saying Niners and Ravens just as the NFL intended.
Yeah, sadly. I mean,
based off the colors of the Super Bowl.
It is the best matchup, but it is a bit disappointing that it's by the book.
The Super Bowl logo. The colors of the logo. It's destined.
Yeah.
Destiny.